all again for this tremendous turnout. I just had this feeling, if we could just hold on to each other, hug each other, not get disturbed by what's obviously a tight race and a dramatic race, with particular difficulties in Michigan and Florida. We just hold on to each other. It's going to be a Democratic year. Don't take it for granted, because we are going to have to hang on to each other. Because I know McCain. I'll tell you, do not underestimate John McCain and his appeal. He's got this appeal, two bases. One is his own record as someone who was able to survive for years of being a prisoner, and what he went through, which has made him particularly sensitive to this whole torture issue. But also, he has the reputation of talking straight and not flip-flopping around on issues, even though, in a number of issues, he has flip-flopped, including taxes. You know, he voted against the Bush tax cut, but now says he favors making it permanent. He's totally wrong on the merits, as we should not make permanent a tax cut, which has put us into a deficit ditch again. After we had years of surplus with Bill Clinton, we're back in a huge ditch, mainly because of the Iraq War and because of this tax program. He's wrong on the merits, I believe, in supporting the Bush tax cuts now and making them permanent, but he's also flipped on it, which runs against the image that he has of being a straight talker. That image can withstand a lot of disproof. Okay, once you get an image of something, it sort of sticks with you, for better or worse, in this political game I'm in. You know, I have an image of being smart. It's these glasses. Take these glasses off, the image disappears. At any rate, all right, what do we got? What would you like to talk about? Yeah.
What is, you know, it's obvious that McCain and Obama have no love for each other. What is the basis for that?
I think, I'm not sure, but I think it has to do with the public financing laws. They both were, well, McCain, of course, is famous for McCain-Feingold and for doing some reform in terms of financing campaigns and putting limits on campaigns. McCain made a lot of enemies on the Republican Party. You got to give him credit. He stuck with a reform, a campaign financing reform. But they've also, there was some real battle that they had over some aspect of campaign financing. I'm not sure what it was. That allegedly is the cause for the hard feelings between them. I don't know much more than that. Yeah.
Do you have an opinion about the permanence or non-permanence of this so-called treaty that the president is advocating that
Right.
be entered?
Right. We're not going to let the president. We're going to do everything we can to stop the president from entering into any agreement which commits us to a permanent presence in Iraq, or which commits us to any kind of action in Iraq. Okay, we're going to do that on a bipartisan basis, I hope, because this is kind of an institution. This is a constitutional issue. The issue being, if a president of the United States is going to commit this country to come to the defense of another country, it's got to be in a treaty. That commits this country to our troops going somewhere. These have always been treaties. Now there's something else called status of forces agreements, which are not treaties. Those have to do with how our troops, while they're in a country, are going to be based. What will the judicial system be if someone is if somebody is charged with a crime in South Korea? Where are they tried? Is it a South Korean court? Is it a military court? It's all these rules, okay, called status of forces agreement, or SOFAs. Those are not treaties. Those have not come to the Senate. But here, the president said that he signed an agreement with the Iraqis in which it was just a skeleton agreement. But the skeleton said that they were going to work out a more detailed agreement relative to commitments of the United States to come to the defense of Iraq, engage in the security operations for Iraqi security. Once those words were in that skeleton agreement, that then set off alarm bells, because now that's more than status of our forces. That has to do with a commitment of our forces to Iraq. And that's what got, I think, a lot of us going. Senator Clinton introduced a bill. Senator Obama, you may remember one of the debates when he was challenged by Senator Clinton, well, will you sign my bill? And he said something like, well, we'll see about that. Well, it took just a couple days for him to see about it, and he co-sponsored it. Properly so. And I'm a co-sponsor too. But we had a hearing with Gates about a week ago, a little more than a week ago now, I guess, in front of the Armed Services Committee, and Kennedy and I both pressed him very hard on this issue. He gave, as he usually does, a straight answer. The difference between Gates and Rumsfeld is the difference between a sunny afternoon and what it was like this morning. That's the difference between them. And Gates gave us a very clear answer. There will not be a commitment of forces to Iraq. They're not going to do it. He gave us that assurance, and it's a good thing. Because, you know, again, this is something where the Constitution says the treaties should have to be ratified by the United States Senate. You can't enter into a treaty without the consent of the U.S. Senate. So we're comforted by Gates. On the other hand, the other day, when the Defense Authorization Bill was signed by the President, we have a provision in that bill which says that there will be no permanent bases in Iraq. That's in the bill that I'm leading, because it's the Defense Authorization Bill. I'm chairman of that committee. So we have that language there, which is, I think, what the American people clearly want, no permanent bases in Iraq. When the President signed our bill, he had one of these signing statements of his, you know, where he signs something and says, but I'm not bound by it. You know, I'm signing a law, but I'm not bound by it, or I may not be bound by it, or I'm not going to commit myself to be bound. In his signing statement, he said he picked out 3 different provisions in our bill, which he said he's not necessarily going to be bound by, or words to that effect. This was one of them. The provision that said no permanent bases. He singled out in his signing statement as being one of the provisions in our bill that he would not commit to implement. That's what gets us nervous. This president gets us nervous for a lot of reasons. You know, every day he gets us nervous. But I think particularly with Gates there, and given the flat-out assurance that Gates gave the Armed Services Committee, and he was very clear. I mean, Kennedy and I sit next to each other in the Armed Services Committee, and we both went after this issue because it's a very important issue. The last thing we want to do is commit ourselves to another country's defense or to send troops to another country without there being a ratification of this by the Senate. Yeah.
Isn't it time to consider just doing away with the Electoral College with our high-tech environment now to, you know, if 4 wins by over 500,000 votes and we're still stuck with this turkey for 8 years, you know, it seems to me that the whole thing is outmoded. At least the study should be made. Just straight popular voting.
Yeah, but first of all, I want to make sure everybody understands who you're referring to when you say this turkey. I was going to translate that for you. Texas turkey. Texas turkey.
Just kind of the statement.
The question is about the Electoral College. Isn't it time to do away with it? The answer is yes. Clearly, it's time to do away with it. Now, we're not going to be able to amend the Constitution to do away with it for a very simple reason. The small states love it. Yeah. The reason they love it is they are given a disproportionate impact on who the President of the United States is. If you live in Idaho or Wyoming or any state that has a relatively small population, you have a bigger say than folks in larger states. And the reason is that the electoral vote is the combination of the number of members of the House of Representatives